Chapter 1. She does not know who he is. It was late at night. A black full-size Lincoln SUV is driving into an extravagant mansion in a city's most expensive suburb. Inside the mansion, Bianca Rain's eyes were covered with a silk blindfold. He did not want her to know who he was. Don't be afraid. Take deep breaths. You can do it, Bianca. There's nothing more important than getting Dad a liver transplant so he can live. It's fine to sacrifice a little for Dad. She could not ignore the sound of the car entering the mansion. Now that it had come to this, all she could do was keep talking to herself, to persuade and comfort herself. When Luke Crawford walked in, his body tall and his spine straight, he immediately saw Bianca, who was standing in his room. She was young, in the prime of her youth. Hello. She could sense his body approaching, so she instinctively took a step back despite the blindfold, stuttering as she greeted him stiffly. She had thought that the past few days of mental preparation had left her numb to everything, so she would not shy away. Now that it was actually time, though, she still could not help but feel scared. How pathetic. The urge to run was strong. Luke did not know if what he was doing tonight was right, but he did know that he desperately needed to find a woman and have a kid before his next birthday. That was what old Master Crawford demanded. Luke looked down on the petite girl from above. What are you afraid of? The man's voice was deep, mellow, and mesmerizing. Bianca was a little shocked. Why did he have such a young-sounding and melodious voice? How could a middle-aged old man have such an amazing voice? I don't have any sexual diseases, neither do I have any sick fetishes, the man said, his voice deep and rich. He seemed to be comforting her. He was certain that she was not shy. No, she was scared of him. Before she could recover, she heard that man continue. Let's begin. The man spoke without warmth, as though he was announcing the start of a conference. He sounded so spectacularly solemn. The next second, she was lifted into his arms. This was the first time Bianca had been carried by a man like this, and her heart nearly stopped. If it hurts, remember to tell me to stop, Luke said again. He thought he was being quite considerate by reminding her. This only scared Bianca even more, though. He reached out his hand to grab her. She retreated away from him. Don't retreat. The man barked harshly, his Adam's apple bobbing. He abruptly grabbed her fair and slender wrist, pulling her into his embrace and warning her in a low voice. Don't back away. Bianca did not dare to pull away anymore, because his words made her face flush in an instant. Still, if he really was a young man with money and good looks, why would he have to pay for a child with a normal woman like her? Could it be that he was really ugly? So ugly that no woman would be willing to have his child, even though he was filthy rich? I have a question. Speak. The man's voice was filled with impatience, and his warm hand was peeling off her clothes with some haste. It was supposed to be an IVF procedure, so why? Why did you want to do it the natural way suddenly? That was the question plaguing her mind. The man's warm breath blew on her forehead. As soon as she asked that, she gasped at the sudden touch. Her little yelp immediately put some emotion in Luke's voice. He said, I don't want to lose a single chromosome, so I prefer it if we cut the middle man. Is that a good enough reason for you? The next moment, he pinched her tightly with his large hand. Ow! There was a thin layer of sweat on Bianca's forehead. Her brain was not working, she struggled, but he pinned her down forcefully and easily kept her motionless. She was a tender flowering bud. Luke knew that if he had to do this if he wanted children, and he thought that the only way he could ease his guilty conscience was by treating her as gently as he could. He frowned slightly, his breathing growing heavy. It felt like he was about to lose control of his body's primal instincts. That night, Bianca felt like a blade of leaf drifting on the water. She experienced all sorts of feelings: pain, tears, helplessness, drowsiness. Bianca did not know when he left. When she woke up, she looked at the clock and saw that it was 3 in the morning. The butler, Faye Thomas, was not asleep yet. She walked over to Bianca and said very respectfully, Allow me to take you to the bathroom, Miss Rain. Thanks, but I can handle it myself. Bianca was a little dazed, and the dried tears on her face made her skin feel a little stiff. She could not bring herself to expose her unsightly body to the female butler. Faye retreated out of the room. After that, Bianca got out of bed and stumbled toward the bathroom. By the time she washed herself down and returned to the room, the sheets and covers in the bedroom had been switched out. That night she had a dream. She dreamed of that year, when she was in middle school, studying in the small town her grandfather was from. It was a spring full of showers. and she was with her female classmates, looking over the wall as they sneakily peeked at the basketball competition going on in the court of the high school next year. The idol of the school was so cool and handsome, his every move stealing their hearts as he played ball. That was the senior who had transferred from another school, the boy called Crawford. The next day, Bianca woke up, her entire body feeling unnaturally weary and sore. She stood in front of the wash basin, holding up her toothbrush and staring at the mirror for a long time. Dazed, she remembered the dream she had last night. That upperclassman in her memories, Crawford, was the prince of every girl's impractical dreams. Back then she was small, worthless, and bullied at school. She did not even understand what love between a man and a woman meant yet. So when she was at her most helpless and desperate, she had greedily fantasized that she had an older brother who would protect her. Later, when she reached the age to entertain her first thoughts of romance, she realized that the boy who suddenly appeared in her mind was that upperclassman named Crawford, who had only studied for 1 year at the high school next door before vanishing. Her thoughts wandered off, but she was soon called back to her senses by the water overflowing from the sink. She shook her head and inwardly cursed herself for being so repulsive. "Bianca, you don't deserve to like him anymore." She locked herself in the room. That night, Bianca received a message. That man was here again. Faye was quite surprised. After all, the young master had been here just last night. So why was he back here again tonight? The mansion erupted into a flurry of activity. They had to get everything ready ASAP. Bianca already felt like her body was falling apart. But she could not bring herself to make any requests regarding the frequency. Luke was wearing a pair of classy black trousers and a white shirt. After he entered the mansion, he went straight to the bedroom Bianca was staying in. She did not dare to say anything. She barely even breathed. The room was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping would be unbearably loud. Luke held his coat in his right hand, lifting his left hand. His eyes were fixed tightly on the blindfolded woman, and then he put his large palm on the back of her neck, pulling her toward him gently until she was right up against his body. Bianca stumbled, stiffened, and held her breath. She did not dare to move even a muscle. Luke lowered his head to look at the girl, who was practically in his embrace. His throat flexed, and he pursed his thin lips, his gaze falling on her clean and fair face, about the size of his palm. His eyes gradually grew hotter, his gaze scalding as it moved downward slowly. Finally, he looked at her tender lips. However, the contract had clearly stated one thing: no kissing. Damn it. He was actually starting to regret one of the conditions he set. "Let's begin," the man said, his voice hoarse. He threw his coat aside and turned off the lights as he lifted her into his arms. She furrowed her brow deeply in the darkness and sank her teeth into the pillow. She did not dare to make a single sound. Chapter 2: Successfully Conceived. Once he was done, the man left. Bianca was exhausted to the point of passing out. She stayed curled up on the bed for a long time. The doctors said it was easier for her to conceive this way. This continued for more nights than she could keep track of. Luke Crawford would come to the mansion every night. No matter how late his work kept him, he never failed to show up. The middle-aged driver who followed Luke around, Charles Finn, was Faye's husband. Both of them were experienced in these things, so they really wanted to give their young master a word of advice. These things should be taken slowly. Rushing it would only be unhealthy. However, their haughty and aloof young master was also known for being a harsh employer with the cold face of a devil. He was famous for being hard to handle. The couple had no choice but to keep their mouths shut. They could only watch as that young girl was rendered limp and listless every day thanks to their young master's energetic demands. She looked like she had all the energy sapped clean out of her. This was the last night of the month. Bianca seriously could not read this man's approach here. Sometimes he would be gentle, but at other times, he seemed to be determined to cause her pain. Between this and that, it felt like her body was starting to disobey her too. Once they were done, the man cleaned himself up and put on an expensive watch, looking like a proper gentleman. He addressed the girl curled up under the covers coolly, saying, "I await the good news." With that he left. The bedroom fell silent once more. To Bianca, this stranger, whose name and look she did not know, was nothing short of horrifying. He seemed to hide within him a monster that had just been released, and that terrified her. That night, he left the mansion later than usual. She heard him leave the room and stand outside the mansion. There was then the click of a lighter, sounding especially loud in the empty mansion. She just had to get up. She just had to sit up and look outside the window, and she would know what he looked like. However, she was afraid that what she saw would be a nightmare a month later. The early detection pregnancy test Bianca was holding finally showed 2 red lines. They were a very deep shade of red. She had been anxiously waiting for this positive result for the entire month. In the meantime, other than Faye, she had not seen anyone else from the other end of the deal, not even that man. If she had not managed to conceive in that month, she would have to continue doing those things with that man at night, just like they did last month. Yet now she finally tested positive for pregnancy. Thank goodness. She just wanted to deliver this child safely and complete her mission, so she could spend the rest of her life slowly forgetting this harrowing experience. Everything would one day fade into the past, right? Once the other party found out that she had successfully conceived, they immediately arranged an intensive checkup routine for her. When Faye first approached her with the follow-up deal, Bianca had only asked for 2 things. Firstly, she wanted to keep going to school as usual until she began to show. Only then would she take some time off from school in preparation for the birth. Secondly, she wanted to stay in her rental room in the meantime. She felt more at ease there. She was not used to all that space in the mansion, not in the slightest. I'll have to ask my boss about your requests. After all, the baby in your belly is his child. Faye instantly turned around and made the call. Standing next to the floor-to-ceiling window high atop the hospital, she recounted Bianca's 2 requests to her boss over the phone. A minute later, Faye ended the call. The boss has agreed to your requests. Bianca nodded, thanking her somewhat dazedly. That afternoon, once she was back in her rented room, she called the hospital. Hello, is this Dr. Joyce? May I ask about my dad? How is he? Don't worry, the doctor replied. We received the funds, and we'll have a donor soon enough too. We're already preparing for the surgery, and it won't be long. Thanks. Bianca did not know what else she should say. She had earned both the money and the donor by selling out her own body. Should she feel glad? Should she feel devastated? Neither. After she hung up, she lowered her head and sprawled herself onto the table, staring into space by herself. A long while later, her tears drenched her lashes nevertheless. After a pause, she used her palm to rub away the tears that were spelling everywhere. She then forced herself to smile. Her dad was saved. That was definitely something to be glad about. 5 months later, by now, her stomach was really starting to show. Faye was fully in charge of handling Bianca's leave from school. When the butler left the school, the principal personally walked her to the day, shaking her hand and bidding her goodbye respectfully. Bianca stood a distance away, feeling a little surprised that someone like the principal had to treat Faye with that much respect. Did that mean Faye's employer, the child's father, was really such a hotshot? Still, Bianca purposely tried not to think about all of this. Faye walked over to where she was standing next to the bus stop, saying, Don't worry. I took time off for you using the excuse that you're not feeling well. No one knows that you're pregnant, and we'll all keep it a secret. That put Bianca's heart at ease. That afternoon, Bianca went to the hospital to visit her father. She was only 18 this year, yet she was here, pregnant with the child of a man she did not know. There was no way her father, Kevin Rain, would accept such a thing. Thankfully, it was currently in the autumn, so she could wear more clothing to hide her bump. She wore a thin woolen sweater, but her stomach was showing, so she wore a loose hoodie on top of that. At least this way, she managed to hide her figure. This was the private hospital with the best medical technology and skills in a city. Bianca arrived at the floor where her father was warded. She made her way to the room with an air of familiarity. But before she could go in, she heard her stepmother, Jennifer Lee's voice. Chapter 3 The twins are born. Hear me out, Kevin. We only have 2 daughters, right? I know Marie isn't your daughter by birth, but she's called you her father all her life. Before Jennifer finished that sentence, Kevin interrupted her. He had been recuperating in bed for many months now, and he was already feeling much better. What are you trying to say? Just tell me straight. After all, I'm your loving husband. I know you love me and our Marie. Jennifer held Kevin's hand, so thin that it was practically skin over bone, and said softly, You mentioned that you'd send Bianca overseas to study after she graduates from high school, right? Our Marie is only 2 years older than Bianca, and all she does these days is hang around bars. She's not going to class properly at all, and I'm worried sick. After all, she is my only biological child. Kevin, I want Marie to study overseas with Bianca. Bianca stood outside the door, frowning slightly. Marie was 20 years old this year, and she had somehow learned how to play hooky from someone back in her second year of middle school. She smoked, drank, and stayed out all night. Those were all labels describing how special this Marie was. Bianca had no love lost for this non-biological older sister of hers. Kevin Rain was no millionaire. His entire life savings amounted up to exactly $600,000, and he worked his heart out every day for this second family of his. In fact, he had worked so hard that he fell ill, his liver failing him completely. The doctor even declared that he was on his deathbed. Yet he still refused to touch any of his $600,000 in savings for his own treatment. 2 months ago, Kevin explicitly stated that he was giving up on getting treated. Once the patient had given up on life, there was nothing anyone else could do, be it the doctors or his own biological daughter. Kevin even tearfully forced his daughter to hear out his will, saying, "Bianca, I didn't accomplish much in my life. All I did was save you this $600,000. Don't be too upset after I die. After the funeral, take this money and go study overseas. Live your best life. Don't be as greedy as your mother, and don't be as useless as your father. As long as you take that to heart, I don't mind dropping dead right now." Even now, Bianca's eyes reddened whenever she recalled that moment. She knew very well that her father was going to save that $600,000 for her studies, even if it meant sacrificing his life. That was why she had no choice but to make that deal in secret, in exchange for some funds and a suitable donor for her father. She stood outside the door, looking at how her father and stepmother professed their love for each other. Instead of feeling glad, she just felt an unprecedented sense of frustration. Finally, Bianca did not go in. When she went downstairs, she happened to bump into Marie. "Oh, if it isn't our good little Bianca." Marie shoved Bianca lightly with one hand, a cigarette for women held between her fingers. She then blew a mouthful of smoke into Bianca's face, and then assessed Bianca's body up and down, clicking her tongue. "You're 18 now, and your father's dying without the money for his medical fees. What I say, wanna try selling out a few more times? You could keep your dad alive for a while longer." Bianca looked at her revolting older sister evenly, her expression blank. It felt as though her frustration was building up so much that she would explode if she did not vent. So she spat in Marie's face. "I love your suggestion. It must feel so relieving, like letting a huge one rip." Marie glared at her with her beautiful eyes. Bianca's attitude had instantly ticked her off. "Damned brat, so you have the guts to talk back to me now?" Bianca walked away dejected. Marie was so angry that her hand shook. She turned around and yelled at the top of her voice. "There you go, acting all holy again. Well, I can't wait to see when you show your true colors. Even your dad said that your mom's shameless. I think you should get yourself checked out at a decent hospital, just in case you turn out to be the B***starred child of some one-night stand." When Bianca was 7 months pregnant, she could clearly feel that the life inside her belly was growing much more energetic now. It would kick her, and that gave her an unprecedented happiness. After a while, she started to imagine what the baby would look like once it was born. Would it be a boy or a girl? Her stomach was so huge. Was it getting too much nutrition? Since Bianca overheard her father agreeing to send Marie overseas, as well at the hospital that day, she stopped going to the hospital quite so often. It was not that she stopped loving her father. It was just that her stomach was getting larger, and she was worried that her father would be able to tell that something was wrong if she visited him too often. The heavy down clothes could help her hide it, but it was not infallible. Besides, Jennifer was constantly by Kevin's side. Bianca did not know if she was really that concerned about her husband's health, or if she was more worried about saving that $600,000 for Marie. Bianca could only hold her head and hope it was the former. A little while later, Bianca found out that her father had gotten out of bed and back to work, doing overtime and going out on business trips without a moment's rest. Bianca was angry and exasperated, and she tried to persuade her father several times over the phone, but it was all to no avail. After the new year, her expected due date had arrived. She stayed in the best maternity room the private hospital had to offer, and there were a few female doctors caring for her all day, every day. They ran tests and watched over her every need, making sure not to miss a single thing. Bianca never tried to find out who the baby's father was, but these people would sometimes discuss him openly in front of her. They never said his name, But Bianca could be certain that the baby's father was definitely no ordinary businessman. Bianca did not know the slightest thing about her own condition, but she later heard the results of the doctor's discussion. They wanted her to go for a C-section. After that, she was wheeled into the operation theater. She did not feel any pain during the process. Maybe it was hurt a lot after the anesthesia wore off. The child had lived inside her for about 9 months, but now it had suddenly been taken out of her. They had to go their separate ways now. The feeling of parting with her own flesh and blood pained her terribly. It was a sharp ache that pierced her in the heart. Before she knew it, her tears flowed past the bridge of her nose and dripped onto her cheek. From the very beginning, all of this was just a fair and formal deal, right? So why did her heart still hurt like this? Faye had been keeping an eye on Bianca's emotions the entire time, watching as she wept helplessly. Finally, when Bianca was wheeled out, Faye executed her orders and told Bianca, "You're only 19. This matter will only ever be a secret you must hide for life. Child, I hope you will shake this off soon, and I hope you have a good life from now on." Faye was consoling her, but the words were cruel. "Can you tell me if it's a boy or a girl?" Bianca asked weakly. "It's a girl, and she's perfectly healthy," Faye replied just as old Master Crawford told her to. They wanted to avoid any unnecessary trouble in the future, so they had no choice but to lie to Bianca. In truth, she had given birth to a pair of twins, a healthy baby boy and a healthy baby girl. Bianca closed her eyes, her face pale. She was exhausted and sleepy. A girl. There was a new life in the world now. It was her daughter. Bianca only stayed in the hospital for 10 days. She could not stand doing nothing in the hospital all day. She could not stand the pain of having her thoughts centered around her daughter and nothing else. Once she left the hospital, Bianca returned to her rented room. The first thing she did was call her father. It was Kevin's phone, but Jennifer was the one who picked up. "Bianca, your father's busy. What's the matter?" Bianca paused. Since when had it become so difficult for her to reach her father? "When will he be free?" she asked. "I can't say for sure. Your dad's working really hard to make sure you can go overseas. Should I tell him to call you once he's free?" Jennifer said. "I'll wait for his call." Bianca lowered her head and hung up the call. In truth, she knew that Jennifer would not pass the message. Right now, she could count her living relatives on one hand. Her father had gone to another city and was working desperately for this strange family of theirs. Her newborn baby daughter might be in this city, or she could be somewhere else. From the moment she was born, that baby only belonged to the man behind that deal. As for her mother, it was as though that person had never existed at all. Bianca did not know what the woman looked like, where she was, what kind of a life she led, or if she ever once missed her daughter. Chapter 4 Half of Her Blood. Bianca shook her head and forced herself to not think about the mother whose name and face she did not know. That woman was a stranger to her. After a while her phone rang. The caller was Bianca's best friend Nina Langdon. Bianca picked up. "Hi. It's been a long time since we video called. Why are you trying to avoid me?" Nina complained into the phone. She rested her cheek on her hand dejectedly, saying, "Are you sure you want to go to the UKB? What if someone bullies you there? My fists don't reach that far. Also, I hear that guys mature early overseas, and loads of school dorms are co-ed. You gotta be really careful about that when you go there. Hey, do you understand what I'm getting at? Forget it, I'll just be open with you. If you really can't hold back when you see those foreign hotties, remember to use protection." On her screen, Bianca could see that Nina was sitting in a small restaurant. It seemed like she had just ordered her food and was waiting for it to arrive. On the wall of the restaurant behind Nina, there was a fairly large television screen. The TV was reporting some entertainment news with a very clear caption. It stated that a 56-year-old tycoon recently had a daughter. However, nobody knew who the girl's mother was. Bianca, are you even listening to me?" Nina saw that Bianca had gone completely motionless on her screen, and her emotions were clearly out of whack too. Nina hastily shook her screen, saying, "Bianca, can you hear me? What's the matter? Don't scare me." Bianca was quite sensitive right now. When she left the hospital, she swore an oath to never think about the child she had carried inside her. Still, how could that actually be possible? That baby had half of her blood. Bianca was going mad. She was really going to lose her mind. What good would harping on it do, though? She had to stop thinking about it. She hung up and washed her face with cold water. That did nothing to calm her down. Perhaps it was because she had been abandoned by her mother since she was a child. So Bianca projected her childhood experiences onto her baby. She could not forget her ice-cold childhood. She did not have a mother, only her grandfather and father. Her father had been earning a living away from home, and her grandfather gradually grew older. Their neighbors never stopped gossiping about her parents, their negative voices echoing through her childhood days. She grew up being bullied, in a shroud of self-deprecation. She did not know why her lack of a mother made her the target of bullying, but their verbal assaults and curses filled her ears. Sometimes she hated her mother. When she closed her eyes, all she could think of now was that middle-aged tycoon on the entertainment news report on TV. He recently had a daughter, but no one knew who the girl's mother was now. She had become the type of woman she hated the most. A mother who gave birth to a baby, but did not take responsibility for the child. She stumbled back to her room and picked up her phone again, searching up news about that tycoon and his child. The reports showed that the man was 56 years old and balding, but he kept in decent shape, and he was not short. For a while there, Bianca could not tell if this old man was really her baby's father. Oh yeah, there was his voice too. Bianca started searching up videos of that tycoon too, trying to hear that old man's voice. She wanted to know if it was the same voice as the one she heard those nights. Unfortunately, she searched for a long time, until her phone ran out of electricity, but she still could not find a video with his voice in it. She was filled with despair. In the east side of a city, at the house of the Crawfords, one of the top dogs even among the wealthy elites. It was just about time to eat, and the dinner table in the mansion was covered with a magnificent spread of food. Almost every member of the family was here, men and women alike. 2 wet nurses pushed in a pair of baby cots, bringing them to old Master Crawford's side. Old Master Crawford was sitting in his wheelchair, as he looked at his fair rosy great-grandson in his cot. This child looks just like Luke. I'm sure he'll be a formidable figure when he grows up as well. The old master was quite pleased. As for every other Crawford sitting around the table, they smiled slightly. Even if they were angry, they did not dare to show it. Old Master Crawford played with his great-grandson for a long time before raising his head and addressing the entire family firmly. If it weren't for Luke and his ceaseless hard work over the past 2 years, the Crawfords would have long since fallen out of glory. Any objection when I say that? No one had any objections, but no one explicitly agreed either. Despite his advanced age, old Master Crawford still had a keen eye. He looked around him and took in everyone's expression. I'm old now, and it's time I handed over the family business to the young people. With that, he turned to Louis Crawford and said, Louis, you should tail your older brother from now on, and learn from him. Sure, Louis said flippantly before falling silent again. Dad, what do you mean by that? Susan Armstrong leaped to her feet, her expression filled with resentment. Luke is your grandson, yes, but so is our Louis. You're breaking your daughter-in-law's heart here. How is my son Louis any worse than Luke? It was only because Luke Crawford was not here today that Susan dared to stand up and say all that. Old Master Crawford only ever had one son, and his son had 2 sons, Luke and Louis Crawford. Luke was mature and down to earth, but he could be ruthless when he needed to. No one dared to say a word against him when it came to doing business. Louis, however, was known for being a playboy. He was not stupid, but he used all of his wits on getting girls. Other than himself, no one knew if he had any ambition or desire for a career. Old Master Crawford ignored Susan's protests. Choosing an heir was a matter of utmost importance, and if he let his emotions get in the way of his decision-making, if he made a single mistake, he might end up destroying everything the Crawfords built up over the years. Start a video call. There's something I want to discuss with Luke, instructed old Master Crawford to his servants. Someone immediately started a video call and placed the device instead of the old master. What's the matter, grandfather? Luke asked from the other end. He was on an outstation trip, and it seemed he was sitting in a solemn-looking office right now. It's about time we gave my great-grandson a name. I have an idea. What do you think of Clarence? Clarence Crawford. I want him to grow up with a clear eye, to have a mind that is pure and white, said the old master. Susan was furious at being ignored, but she did not dare to say anything, so she sat down crossly without a word. On the other end of the call, Luke did not respond to old Master Crawford immediately. Instead, he frowned on the screen and stayed silent for a moment before saying with determination, Grandfather, I get what you mean about a pure mind and a clear eye. In that case, how about Blanche instead? It also means pure white. Blanche Crawford. Sounds good. The old man immediately looked at his great-grandchild's face in his cot. You have a name now, baby bee. Old Master Crawford was not going to interfere with his great-granddaughter's name, because her father felt that daughters should be pampered like princesses. She would be allowed to choose her own official name, once she could decide for herself. Time passed in the blink of an eye. Soon it was time for them to go overseas. Bianca did not leave the country with Marie, because Jennifer had arranged for Marie to go to the UK 1 month in advance, so she could get used to life there. Where you get over there, I'll be relying on you to take care of Bianca and Marie, Kevin said solemnly to Jean Langdon at the airport. Jean was over 180 centimeters tall, and quite the perfect looker. He was Nina's older brother, and he had long since intended to go overseas for his studies. He just could not decide which country he wanted to go to. When he heard his younger sister say that Bianca was going to the UK, he immediately made up his mind to go with her. Every man might have a girl in his mind, a girl as wonderful as his first love. For Jean, that girl was Bianca. Take care of B. Nina hugged her older brother and whispered into his ear. You can forget about that Marie Lee though. Her stink might rub off on you, Jean. When the two of them lined up at the immigration checkpoint, Bianca kept turning around, hot tears in her eyes, as she waved her aging father goodbye. Chapter 5 Return, 5 years later. When Bianca next set foot in the busy city once more, 5 years had passed. She had been away for almost 2,000 days and nights. It was not a very long time, but it was not nothing either. Back then, she had been pushed about mercilessly by destiny. She had been completely powerless. Now she just wanted to use her own strength, to take control of her life with her own hands. It was morning. B. Over here, Nina wound down her car window and waved at Bianca, who was walking out of her suburb. Time had passed. 5 years later. The two of them were no longer clueless girls of 18 or 19. Bianca and Jean had returned to the country together yesterday, and Nina had been the one to pick them up from the airport. That night, Jean had taken Bianca back to the Langdons' place for dinner. Mr. and Mrs. Langdon were more than happy with Bianca as their future daughter-in-law. That morning, Jean had wanted to go to the interview at the company with Bianca, but something came up, and he could not join her. Bianca got into Nina's car and sat in the passenger seat, wearing her seatbelt. Do you know what my mom said last night after you left with my brother? Nina asked. What did she say? Bianca was worried that Jean's parents would not like her. My mom said, look at Bianca. She's fair and beautiful, gentle and sweet. Now look at you. Why are you two different? You lay about at home. You're rough like a man. And you swear like a sailor. Nina could not help but touch her friend's soft face as she said that, clicking her tongue. The air out there sure is good for your skin. As if you've never left home before, so you don't know how tough it is. Bianca smacked her naughty hand away. Focus on the road. The two of them chatted on the way. It was more than 40 minutes past 8 when they reached T Corporation. I hope my brother isn't late. The boss is a heartless tyrant, you know. Nina muttered to herself as she lowered her head and hurried her brother on WeChat. A heartless tyrant? Nina was making Bianca nervous now too. She turned on her phone and went online, searching up information on the boss of T Corporation again. She was hoping that she might find something that could help her during the interview. Most of the stuff she found online was nothing more than baseless rumors about the rich and famous. The president of T Corporation, part of Crawford Industries, was a man called Luke Crawford. He was 29 years old this year, but no one knew if he was single or married. No members of the press had yet to find out anything about his private life all this time. Actually, the Crawford name still held a little significance for Bianca. However, those were just her innocent childish fantasies from her past. By now, she had long since buried those dreams in the deepest corner of her heart. The news also reported that there was a huge incident 5 years ago, when the two Crawford sons fought over the family business. Louis Crawford, the legitimate heir that the outside world had acknowledged, was suddenly removed overnight. On the other hand, old Master Crawford suddenly adopted another unknown heir to the Crawford name, Luke Crawford, and the latter successfully took over the family business, eventually inheriting the dying Crawford Industries. An unknown heir to the Crawford name, the author of the article, was subtly hinting that Luke Crawford was, to put it bluntly, an illegitimate son of the wealthy family. Bianca looked at her phone thoughtfully. The T Corporation tower was so tall that it immediately intimidated anyone the moment they stepped into it. Jean was in a rush to get here. He had read up on the company's history before, and when he saw how huge the building was now, he grew inevitably worried. He did not want to embarrass himself in front of Bianca. That was why he was not allowed to fail this interview. In a workshop somewhere in the tower, there were 5 executives on the interview panel. One of them was none other than the highest-level boss here at T Corporation, Luke Crawford. After yet another graduate from a famous school completed their interview, one of the other interviewees glanced at Luke, trying to read his expression for some of his thoughts. However, he soon noticed that the boss' attention had somehow shifted to the surveillance camera screen. What was he looking at? Next, said one of the other interviewees. The camera was showing the footage outside, where all sorts of men and women looking for a job were waiting for their interview. By watching how they behaved outside, the interviewees could clearly deduce how the candidates were like in private. Luke's gaze was deep and complicated as he stared at one of the girls. No, she was a woman. Bianca was 23 now, and she no longer had her initial childlike innocence. She had developed spectacularly well, be it in her figure or her small smiles. Everything about her exuded a unique femininity. Luke's mind was abruptly brought back to that time 5 years ago, when this woman moaned and cried out as he made love to her every night. My brother will be here soon. Nina nudged Bianca outside in the corridor. Bianca came back to her senses and kept away the phone she had been looking at for so long. Was it because so much time had passed, and that was meddling with her memories? When Bianca looked at a picture of the boss, Luke Crawford, she found him somewhat familiar. He really did look a little like that upperclassman who played basketball back in that high school. They had the same last name too. Just then, Jean ran up to the stairs and walked up to Bianca, rubbing her hair fondly. Sorry I'm late. It's fine. It isn't our turn yet anyway, Bianca said to Jean, perfectly understanding. Next to them, Nina pouted. You're blinding me with your PDAs, guys. Have some pity for this single Pringle and tone it down, please. I still have use for my eyes. You're only delaying the inevitable. Should you dig your eyes out before I marry Bianca and bring her home then? Do it. Marry her. Nina's eyes were practically shining as she told her brother. Mom and Dad were more than happy with B last night. Once both of you settle down with your jobs, you should just hurry it up and get hitched. Jean nodded and could not help but glance at Bianca next to him. Bianca was feeling a little troubled. She was very happy with her life right now. In fact, she had to thank Jean for his tireless care and guidance over the past 5 years. He was the reason she had managed to overcome the trauma of her past. Before Jean confessed to her, she had noticed that he had feelings for her. Her past experiences had left her feeling small and worthless. So back then, she had instinctively avoided Jean. She even avoided all men who tried to approach her. During all those days that held not a hint of light for her, Jean never once stopped pursuing her and caring for her. Finally, he even managed to uncover her painful past. To Bianca's surprise, Jean did not abandon her. He did not even think that it was her fault for bearing a stranger's baby. Bianca thought she was very fortunate in that sense. Next up, Jean Langdon. I'll be off now. Jean squeezed Bianca's hand. Go on, Bianca said with a nod. When Jean pushed the door open and walked into the room, he immediately felt a sharp gaze on him. He followed it and traced it back to the famous young boss of T Corporation. Luke had seen everything Jean did with Bianca outside. The interview was very formal, solemn, and professional. Jean was very capable himself, so he answered every single one of the interviewer's questions calmly and composedly. The way he carried himself earned him plenty of brownie points. Luke's eyes turned back to the camera screens again. On the screen, Bianca was staring intently at the door, biting her lips softly and squeezing her fingers. She seemed to be very concerned about a certain someone's interview results inside the room. Chapter 6, Heart Racing. 10 minutes later, Jean was done with his interview. He pushed the door open and walked out. Bianca immediately got to his feet. How was it? The interviewers ask some tough questions, but it isn't anything we can't handle. Jean could not help but kiss Bianca on the forehead, saying calmly, overall it's not bad. Bianca heaved a sigh of relief. Next, Bianca Rain, the female secretary, called out. Bianca hurriedly straightened out her clothing and went inside anxiously. The second she walked into the room, Luke looked at her with a complicated gaze. Bianca sat down properly and raised her head, meeting each interviewer's eyes one at a time. After that, she introduced herself briefly. Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity to attend this interview. My name is Bianca Rain. Since she decided to return to this country and find a job here, she had come up with plenty of interview openers in her mind. It may not be the most creative way to begin, but it was solid enough and faultless. The interview continued on. Luke assessed her with his cold gaze. Perhaps his stare was just too piercing. While Bianca responded to all of the interview questions expertly, she felt extremely uncomfortable all over. It did not just feel like someone was glaring daggers at her. Instead, it felt like a peculiar type of thorn pricking her all over her body. In truth, Bianca had glanced at Luke too when she first walked into the room. Nevertheless, this was a formal interview, and she had to treat it seriously. Although she had plenty of questions in her heart, she did not dare to let her guard down and become distracted. Miss Rain, are you married? Luke's cool voice suddenly interrupted the interviewers, asking a question that left all the professional interviewers speechless. All the interviewers stopped their formal exchange with Bianca, turning to look at their big boss in unison. He was part of the panel too. No, I'm not, Bianca said, trying to calm herself down. Her heart was actually already racing. In that case, do you have someone you intend to marry? Luke frowned and asked again. Bianca paused for a moment before she nodded and replied, I do. The interviewers were all feeling quite lost. Why was their boss asking this question? Their short conversation allowed Bianca to get a better look at Luke's gorgeous features. Now that she had seen him in person, he did look a lot like that upperclassman from the high school next door back then. This successful businessman was vastly different from the boy that had celebrated his youth in school though, be it in his presence or the expression on his face. Luke Crawford seemed to her like a cold and ruthless man. The interview was finally over. Bianca walked out of the room, feeling weak in the knees. How was it? Tell me. Nina was the first to run up to her and ask. Bianca was stumped, so she said, The interviewer asked me if I'm married, and if I'm not, if there's anyone I intend to marry. Jean frowned when he heard that. What kind of a stupid question was that? It was infringing on her privacy. However, Nina said, Oh, that's normal here in this country. In fact, they're being polite by not asking if you have kids. But why would they ask something like that? Bianca asked in confusion as they went downstairs. Because kids will get in the way of your career, Nina replied, looking at her brother and Bianca. Most local companies discriminate against married women with children. You only recently got back here, so you just gotta get used to it. That afternoon, Bianca and Jean both received calls informing them that they would have a 2-month probationary period. If they passed all the tests during the next 2 months, they would be able to stay at T Corporation permanently as official staff members. The next day, Jean and Nina picked Bianca up, and they went to work together. I plan on buying a car, so we won't have to take my lil sis's car after this, Jean said to Bianca before they walked into the design department's work area. What, you don't want me as a third wheel? Nina teased, purposely walking between the two of them. Bianca smiled and said, Neither of you has to pick me up starting tomorrow. It's too much trouble for you to make such a long detour to my place, and it's very convenient for me to take the subway anyway. It was the first day of work. Bianca was unnaturally serious at work. That afternoon, Jean was suddenly dragged out on an outstation trip by one of their designer seniors in the department. Before he left, Jean grabbed the laptop he designated solely for work and gave Bianca a hurried heads-up before he had to go downstairs. Actually, Jean was feeling pretty confused himself. What was the design department playing at? Seriously, taking a rookie out on a business trip? What if he worked too slowly and dragged down the team's overall efficiency? Bianca did not have the time to wonder about that though. She quickly familiarized herself with the nuts and bolts of her job. When it was about time to get off from work, Nina walked up to Bianca and said, You done? Come to my place for dinner. Your future mother-in-law's invitation. Bianca was just getting used to the company's best building blueprints over the years. When she heard that, she raised her head and said awkwardly, I just got told I have to stay for overtime. Nina's eyes widened, and she hurriedly ran back to her workstation to check her emails. Dang, there really was overtime. It was true that designers had to stay overtime quite often, but Bianca and her brother were especially unfortunate here. One was sent outstation on the first day on the job, while the other had to stay back. The team ate takeaway together for dinner, before continuing to bury their heads in their work. At 10:30 that night, the supervisor finally allowed Nina and the other two girls to go home. Bianca had to keep going though. Her biological clock was going haywire, so Bianca was actually quite exhausted by now. She stood up and took her cup to get herself some coffee. When she returned with her coffee though, her supervisor saw her and said, "The big boss wants this blueprint. Hurry up and bring it to her." Bianca immediately put her cup down and took the blueprint, leaving the design department. There were only 3 people left in the design department: a supervisor, a senior designer, and her, a glorified intern. Take the blueprint to the boss, huh? As Bianca walked into the elevator, Luke Crawford's delicate features appeared in her mind. The elevator went up, all the way to the top floor. Bianca ventured around, and finally found the presidential office. She knocked on the door. "Come in." The man's voice was completely lacking warmth, but it was deep and rich. Bianca went in, walking toward the large desk in the office with the cold color scheme. She placed the blueprint on the desk, saying, "This is the blueprint you wanted, sir." Luke was also focused on his work, so he just reached out his hand to accept the blueprint before holding it up for examination. When Bianca was about to leave, he suddenly raised his head to look at her. Bianca did not want to seem rude, so she had to keep standing there. Could there be something the president wanted with her? Luke's gaze lingered on her for a long while. After 5 years, this woman had become even fairer and more voluptuous. Both her looks and her aura were her exquisite. "You can call it a day now. Go home and get prepared, because you'll be going on a business trip with me tomorrow." Luke pulled his gaze away from her and turned it back onto his work. Bianca wanted to say that she was not capable enough to bear such a huge responsibility as of yet, but Luke had given those orders quite coldly and stiffly. His tone brooked no argument. All she could do was nod and leave the room. Luke turned to look at her again. Her back was beautiful, particularly her slender and flexible waist. It was only a long while later when the man realized that everything from his throat to his chest had gone numb. Chapter 7: Jean acting strange. Bianca left. Luke suddenly put down the blueprint he had been holding. He stood up and left his workstation, walking toward his wine cabinet instead. There, he took out a glass and filled half of it with wine, draining the whole thing with a frown. This cursed lust. It was already quite late when Bianca left the company, but thankfully there was one last subway to take her home. Once she reached home, the first thing she did was reply to Jean's messages on WeChat. After that, she pulled out her luggage and started to organize the things she needed for her trip tomorrow. Just then, her phone rang. The caller ID said it was Jean. "Aren't you asleep yet? I thought I told you to rest early instead of calling me," Bianca said in concern when she picked up. "I'm not done with work yet, so I brought the stuff back to the hotel room to continue overtime." Jean continued, asking her, "I saw your text earlier. Why are you going out station 2? Who will you be going with?" "I don't really know who yet. I'll have to wait until tomorrow morning to find out," Bianca replied. "If there are men going with you, remember to stay away from them," Jean reminded her. "After all, we just started working, so you don't know them well enough yet." "All right, I got it," Bianca said. Immediately after that, she suddenly heard a hammering sound on the other end. It sounded like someone knocking on the door. No, rather than knocking, it sounded more like someone trying to beat the door down. "What's the matter?" Bianca asked nervously. "And nothing." Jean was stuttering all of a sudden, but then he said quickly, "Talk to you later? I'll check on what's happening outside, and then report back to you." He hung up before Bianca could tell him to be careful out there. She lowered her head to look at her luggage, and then at the phone she was holding. Its screen dimming after the call ended. Bianca was worried now, concerned that Jean would encounter trouble out there too, with unfamiliar people in unfamiliar places. Nothing happened that night. The next day, Bianca received a call from her colleague first thing in the morning. She waited for her colleague outside her compound, her weariness showing on her face. She had stayed up until the wee hours of the morning last night, waiting for Jean's call to assure her everything was fine. But he never called. She tried calling him, but his phone was switched off. More than 10 minutes later, a black Bentley stopped in front of her. A man and a woman got out of it. They introduced themselves and got to know each other. The 3 of them then got into the car again. It took 7 hours by car to get to the city they were assigned to, since they would need a car there. The higher-ups had arranged for a male colleague to drive one of the company's Bentleys over there, for convenience's sake. Bianca chatted with her colleagues along the way. They got along quite well, laughing and joking with each other. It was afternoon by the time they reached H City. When they checked into the hotel, her female colleague Sue told Bianca, "Let's go back to our respective rooms first and get changed, get some rest. We'll be in contact again when it's time for dinner." "Sure," Bianca said with a nod. Bianca brought her medium-sized luggage upstairs and went into her room. She took a shower and changed into her nightclothes before taking out the clothes she needed for work, ironing them carefully. Once done, she hung the clothes up in advance. Having completed all her preparations, she glanced at the time. It was already 4 o'clock exactly. Jean had not called her even once since last night until now. He had not even sent her a single message. Now that she finally had time, she gave Jean a call. His phone was finally on this time. However, the dial tone went on for a while without anyone picking up. Bianca was even more worried now, so she called him again. This time, her call was outright rejected. "Sorry, I'm busy right now and I can't pick up. We'll call you when I'm free." Soon, she received a text from Jean on WeChat. Bianca lowered her head and replied, "Okay, I'll leave you to your work." It seemed like he was safe on his end at least. The person hammering on his door last night might have been a random drunkard going to the wrong hotel room last night. After she replied to his message, Bianca put her phone down, looking for something else to do. As soon as she turned though, her phone vibrated again. She had barely turned away when she had to turn back and check the message on her phone. It was a WeChat message, but it was a complete mess. "Ha ha ha ha, you guessed it, fiber mesh, I started an entrance fee iPhone." The sender was Jean, who was supposedly busy right now. Bianca frowned. She sent him a question mark. After more than a minute, Jean finally replied, "I was drawing something and my arm accidentally touched the screen. That was why he sent her such a random string of words." Bianca did not think much of it. Doot, doot, doot. Someone rang her room bell. "Who is it?" Bianca was very cautious since she was in an unfamiliar place and an unfamiliar city. A middle-aged man's voice came from outside. "Miss Rain, I'm Jason Doyle, Mr. Crawford's special assistant. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to open the door for me." Luke Crawford's most trusted special assistant, Jason Doyle, was quite well known. Almost everyone in the company knew about him, and that included Bianca, a newbie. She opened the door. "Nice to meet you." Bianca had barely greeted him when she lowered her head and saw that there were 2 tiny children standing at the door as well. One was a baby boy and the other a baby girl, their eyes bright and their teeth brighter. They looked like 2 perfect dolls. Jason Doyle was standing in a suit, his spine straight as an arrow. Exasperated, he said, "These 2 are Mr. Crawford's children. Their father is busy with work and can't care for them, so..." Bianca had a bad feeling about this. She was not particularly averse to taking care of kids for others, but it just felt so strange to her. After all, she was here to work, not to be a babysitter. Another major reason she did not really want to take care of the children was because she was worried that seeing someone else's kids would keep reminding her of her own. "I'll be good, I promise," the little girl said softly. She raised her head to look at Bianca, blinking her innocent black eyes. "Big brother." The little girl saw that her brother, the little boy, was not saying anything, so she pouted angrily and tugged at her brother's clothes, trying to make him talk. Bianca turned to look at the boy instead. The older brother was slightly taller than his sister, but though he kept a cool expression, he was clearly fond of his sister. That was why he raised his head and told Bianca, who was beyond the door, "I'll be a good boy too." Jason glanced at his watch and said, "I'll leave the kids to you, Miss Rain. There's something else I have to do, so I'll take my leave now." Bianca did not have the chance to refuse. Jason quickly left, and Bianca looked down at the 2 children saying, "Come on in, the 2 of you." The younger sister reached out her short little hand to grab her brother's. Then they walked into the room together. "Do you want anything to drink?" Bianca did not know how to handle kids, especially kids with such a special status. "I want milk," the girl said, sitting on the couch properly. Bianca hurriedly dug out some milk. The milk in the hotel room was extremely expensive. The same milk that was sold for 3.50 yuan in the market was sold for 89 here. Bianca sucked in a breath when she saw the price tag. Then she opened the carton and found 2 glasses, pouring each of the kids 1 glass. The haughty and cold-faced older brother did not drink any of it. The little sister sat on the couch, swinging her legs as she drank half of the cup, and then finishing all of it, even licking her lips to make sure she got every bit of it. Bianca sat on a chair awkwardly, looking at the little darlings on the chair, and trying to find something to talk about. Are you two twins? Of course, the haughty older brother said. He even rolled his eyes, his gaze filled with contempt at Bianca. Idiot, he seemed to say. My sister and I look so similar. Of course we're twins. Chapter 8. Blanca, Rainy. Bianca did not dare to say anything more after the little boy turned his nose up at her. The time ticked past. The boy said, It seems pretty awkward, huh? The girl nodded. Bianca. Lady, you can call my father right now and tell him that you don't want to care for us, the boy said. He was quite the hostile little boy. I never said I don't want to take care of you. She had to make that clear. How could she dare to say she did not want to care for her boss kids? The boss would eat her for lunch. Since you want to take care of us, then you should act like you do. The boy clearly did not like this cold atmosphere. This lady was much dumber than the other ones. Bianca. It was her fault for not checking the almanac before she left the house. Come with me, big bro. The little girl could tell that the auntie's expression was turning unpleasant, and she dragged her brother away angrily. Bianca let out a long breath, watching as the two children disappeared through the bathroom door. Inside the bathroom, the younger sister asked, Big bro, why are you so mean to the pretty lady? She has a motive. The older brother felt bad for his silly little sister and said solemnly, These pretty ladies are only willing to take care of us because they want to marry our dad. They want to marry our dad. The younger sister did not understand. The older brother added, And the other ladies at least know how to pretend to like us. Look at this one. If this lady were to marry their father, she would never treat them well. His sister insisted. Great-grandpa always says we can't judge a book by its cover. However, her brother said angrily, I don't care what you think. In any case, I'll only ever have one mother, and that's the woman who gave birth to me. His sister was ignorant but equally as angry, saying, Great-grandpa said we were planted in the garden. Stupid. Her brother was so furious that his little face turned red. Without another word, he pushed the bathroom door open and walked out. Bianca was alarmed. They had such tempers. Sorry, it's my fault. I don't know how to handle kids, that's why it's all so awkward. Bianca was quite apologetic. The younger sister raised her head and said, It's all Big Brother's fault. Bianca looked at the older brother and tried to say sweetly, Do you want to watch cartoons? She picked up the remote control as she said, Pleasant Goat and Big Big Wolf, or Bubbloo Dabloo? That's so childish. The older brother could not help but call out her stupidity again. Bianca was left feeling awkward. There was another long pause. Miss, why don't you ask us how old we are? Bianca found an excuse to get rid of the awkwardness. So how old are you? I'm 5 and so's my brother. Have you guys started going to school? If they were schooling. Today was Thursday. We do go to school, but we have a private tutor. This time, Dad was the one who said he wanted to bring us out to play. He said there's a really tall Ferris wheel here. The younger sister spilled everything. Oh, I see, Bianca replied. Lend me your phone, I want to call my dad, the older brother said. Bianca blinked and immediately gave the older brother her phone. Blanche searched through Bianca's phone for his father's contact number, but he could not find it. He then looked for his father's WeChat contact, but he could not find that either. You don't have any way to contact my dad? He asked, raising his head to look at Bianca. She shook her head. Nope. The older brother did not seem to believe her, frowning as he said, Are you sure you don't? I told you, she isn't a mean lady who wants to be our stepmother. The younger sister gave her brother a look of contempt from where she sat. The brother looked at his sister a little guiltily, and he did not dare to even look at Bianca. Bianca finally understood. So that was why the boy was so hostile toward her. I have to explain something to you. Bianca looked at the boy and then at the girl. Your father handed you two to Jason, and Jason is busy with work, so he handed you over to me for a while. There's nothing between your father and me. We're just employer and employee. The little boy looked at Bianca thoughtfully. Bianca admitted straight up. Your father and I are from different worlds. Some people are born special, and some are born normal. They'll have different needs and different social circles, so they can't be forced to mix. Do you understand that? No. The younger sister shook her head blankly. Bianca turned to look at the older brother instead. He said, I get it. Dad's bourgeoisie and your proletariat. Bianca burst out laughing. That stings, but you're exactly right. There's a huge gap between your father and me. You don't have to worry. Even if your father is the only man left in the world, I still won't become your stepmother. Do you understand that much at least? The younger sister looked at Bianca and nodded somewhat confusedly. All right, let's be better friends. Bianca introduced herself saying, My name is Bianca Rain. You can call me Miss Rain or just B. I'm Rainey Crawford, like a nice rainy day. The younger sister introduced herself. I'm Blanche Crawford. You can call me Blanca or Lainey. The older brother introduced himself too, putting away his hostility. Rainy, like a rainy day. Blanche Crawford. Blanca, Rainy. Bianca suddenly felt as though she may be fated to meet these children. Once they settled the misunderstanding, the two kids opened up to her happily. She canceled her dinner plans with her colleagues. Her two colleagues went to work after dinner, whereas her current mission was simply to take care of the boss children. Bianca was extremely careful at first, terrified that any knocks or scratches the children might sustain would cost her her job. Eventually, though, she ended up rolling all over the carpet with the kids, her heart filled with a painful satisfaction. Her child would probably be about Lainey and Rainy's age now. When she looked into their happy faces, she could almost see her own baby. How was that child doing? Was she happy? That night, Bianca had dinner with the two little darlings. They had every possible service at the hotel restaurant. Rainey sat in the restaurant and ate her food for a bit before she started drooling over the fried chicken some other children were having. Wipe your drool, it's filthy, her brother scolded her, frowning. Bianca hurriedly grabbed a napkin, wiping the drool from Rainey's mouth. Does your father forbid you from having fried chicken? Bianca felt so bad for Rainey. If her daughter was drooling over fried chicken this badly, she would probably make an exception, just this once. Rainey nodded, but her eyes were still glued on the fried chicken the next table over. She was so distracted that she even dropped her chopsticks onto the floor. Hello, waiter? Bianca waved her hand. 10 minutes later, the fried chicken was served. There were 2 pieces. The older brother did not have any, though, giving both to his sister. Although he really wanted to taste some too, he went against his heart and said, Have all you like. Dad says men must stick by their principles. Bianca did not say anything, but she was quite surprised inside. At the same time, she was pretty in awe of this 5-year-old boy and his self-control in the face of temptation. Some people could achieve extraordinary success after they grew up, but their journeys were not as smooth as they might seem on the surface. No one knew how much they had to hold themselves back, how much they had to sacrifice. Was Luke Crawford one such example? This little boy was cold and wary of everyone. Bianca could not help but remember what Nina said back then, that the boss was a heartless tyrant in the world of business. This little kid was a miniature version of his father. Chapter 9. Open the door, it's me. Little Rainey was unbelievably happy now that she had sneakily eaten some fried chicken behind her father's back. On the way back to the room, Rainey kept sticking to Bianca, hugging her leg like a koala to a tree. It was quite hard for Bianca to walk with the baby hanging off her leg. She had to limp all the way back upstairs. It's really late now. I'll send you back to your room, so you can get to sleep. The adult and 2 children watched cartoons in the room for a while before Bianca turned to the pair of siblings. The older brother looked up at her and said, We don't have the room card. Rainey was hugging Bianca with her plump white hand, her eyes tightly closed. She was almost completely asleep now. Still, how could they get back without the room card? Bianca was feeling conflicted. She had no idea when the president would be able to finish his work for the day and return to the hotel. Let me call Mr. Doyle. Bianca looked at Rainey, who was already falling asleep. She could not move, so she had to ask Lainey to grab her phone. Lainey picked up her phone and passed it to Bianca. Bianca called her colleague and asked for Jason Doyle's work number. Jason picked up soon enough, but he said, I'm sorry to trouble you, Miss Rain, but Mr. Crawford is having a meal with a few provincial leaders. I don't think he'll be able to get away for a while yet. How about this? Can you let the 2 kids sleep with you for the night? Bianca. It was past 10 in the night by the time Bianca managed to lull the children to sleep. Lainey slept on the left side of the large bed, while Rainey took the right side. They were fast asleep. Bianca cleaned up the bathroom as quietly as she could. Then she folded the children's clothes and placed them on the couch neatly. Finally, she tucked Rainey in before carefully stepping into bed herself. Thank goodness the bed was big enough. There was plenty of space for one adult and two kids to sleep comfortably. Within 5 minutes of lying down, Bianca could barely keep her eyes open anymore. Sometime in the earliest hours of the morning, Bianca's phone vibrated under her pillow. She was so sleepy that her eyes hurt, and she had to force them open blearily. She propped herself up slightly and reached for her phone. There was an unknown number on her screen. 139-0909-9999. It was a spam call in the middle of the night, but the number itself was a pretty nice one. Bianca picked up, saying directly and somewhat rudely, "Who is this?" "Open the door, it's me." It was a deep and hoarse voice, sounding especially mesmerizing so late in the night. "Open the door? Who are you?" She was so sleepy. There was silence on the other end of the phone. All she heard was his breathing. Bianca spent a few seconds clearing her mind. Then she saw the two kids sleeping on the bed under the moonlight. "Lagne, Rainier mer." "Mr. Crawford," she ventured. "Open the door." The man's voice was growing deeper. Bianca was so shocked that her heart skipped a few beats. She hurriedly scrambled out of bed and made sure that her nightclothes looked presentable before she opened the door. Her boss was here to get his kids back, but she had fallen fast asleep and kept him waiting for so long. Dang it! Bianca scolded herself in frustration. The two children were fast asleep on the bed. They showed no signs of waking up whatsoever. Bianca opened the door. Luke was standing tall outside the door, his eyes closed and one hand resting against the door frame. He held his coat and the black phone he had been using to call her in one hand. It was obvious that he had been waiting here for quite some time. "And Mr. Crawford," Bianca called his name, too afraid to approach him. Luke raised his head suddenly, weariness written all over his face as he frowned at her. Even stinking heavily of booze like this, the man still radiated confidence and dominance. His surroundings did nothing to hide the air of nobility exuding from deep within his bones. Luke gave her a look, but that look felt like it lasted forever. Neither of them said anything. Bianca tilted her body and stood to a side, letting him go in so he could pick up the kids. When the man walked past her, she could clearly smell the alcohol on him, mixed with a strong and hypnotizing scent of nicotine. Bianca stood at the door, too afraid to move or stare. The lights at the doorway were very bright. She was completely awake now, standing at the open door like a guardian god, waiting for her boss to carry his kids out of the room. The time ticked past. Bianca did not even hear the two children waking up. Confused, she closed the door quietly and crept back into the bedroom. There was only a single lamp illuminating the bedroom. It was not nearly as blindingly bright as it was outside. The scene in the dim lighting was incredibly heartwarming. The large bed that was meant to be hers had been completely taken over by that family of three. The father, who had finally returned from a long day of work, was now sleeping silently with his son and daughter. Should she wake him up or not? If she did, would her boss fire her in a fit of fury? If she did not, where was she supposed to sleep? She thought it over, and eventually decided that she could not wake this mistaken drunkard up and chase him out. If she did, there would probably be very serious consequences. Hence, she grabbed a coat, put it on and left the room. Holding her room card in her hand, she called the female colleague who had come here with her. "Sorry, the number you called is unavailable." A mechanical voice spoke over the phone. Bianca leaned on a corridor wall exhausted. She had forgotten to ask for her female colleague's room number. After some thought, she called Jason Doyle instead. She was stuck on the dial tone for a very long time, but no one picked up. He was probably drunk too. Bianca had no choice but to go to the hotel counter and ask for another room. However, the hotel receptionist said, "Sorry, Miss Rain, but the hotel is fully booked. The rooms here have to be booked at least a week in advance." "Oh, okay. Thanks." Bianca went back upstairs, her mind a mess. Was she supposed to stand outside the door overnight? At slightly past 1 o'clock in the morning, the elevator doors opened. A man and two women walked out. The two women were heavily made up, and the man was dressed in denim, his head covered with intimidating scars. He kissed the two women he was hugging, laughing and chuckling as they talked. When he saw Bianca, the man's eyes immediately lit up. He let go of the two women and approached her, saying, "Ooh, I found a pretty little damsel in distress. Where are you from? Come on, wanna have some fun with me? I guarantee it'll feel great." "You're mad," Bianca instinctively yelled at him. She was so startled that she immediately opened the room door with her key card. ducking into the room like a little bunny. She then leaned against the door, taking countless deep breaths. It sounded like someone outside was knocking on the door. It was not too heavy nor too soft. The fear chased every other thought out of Bianca's mind, and she did not dare to lean against the door anymore, since they were knocking on it. Instead, she turned and headed for the bathroom door. She was always quite timid, and now she was so terrified that her heart was pounding madly. However, before she could even digest that encounter outside, she felt a pair of large warm hands reach under her coat from behind her. They rubbed her body and reached upward. She turned in horror. She did not know when, but the wooden bathroom door behind her had been slowly pushed open. She lost her balance, falling into a man's solid embrace. "Ah!" She cried out softly in surprise, but the rest of her words were swallowed up. All she could do was moan suggestively. It was pitch black in the bathroom, and she felt a moist breath blowing into her face. There was only one grown man in this hotel room, and that was the big boss, Luke Crawford. It was therefore obvious to see who the man hugging her was. Bianca frowned and tried to push him away, but he would not budge. Out of the frying pan, and into the fire. She was scared, but her mouth was sealed off and completely useless. The man kissed her in the dark, shadowy night. Bianca held her breath, her words of protest morphing into vague whimpers. Chapter 10 Bad Man. For a few seconds there, Bianca's mind went blank. She frowned and inwardly berated herself for being so weak-willed. "Bianca, don't forget you have Gene. Gene is the only man you can feel anything for. You're with me now. How could you get distracted?" The man forcefully pushed her white coat aside. There was a moist and warm sensation on her lips. He then lowered his head and kissed her hair. After a long time, his low voice spoke into her ear seductively. Bianca was about to explode when she heard the man's low voice. Luke had a really nice scent of shower foam on him, just like she did. That meant that this man had just used her shower foam when he took a shower earlier. Bianca knew just how dangerous it would be if she did not put up a desperate fight right now. Just plain struggling was not going to work. All she could do was apologize in advance for disrespecting her boss. At least that would be better than whatever was going on now. Bianca's eyes grew used to the darkness, and now she could vaguely see the man's delicate features. The dim lighting shone on him, making him look surreal. His thin lips seemed especially tempting. Anyone who did not know better might think that this man here was the undisputed king of porn videos. His every movement was shot full of pheromones. Bianca applied pressure into her fingers as she squeezed the man's body. She then gathered up her courage and raised her leg. Bending her knee, she rammed it forcefully into the man's nethers. Ugh! There was a muffled groan, and the man frowned deeply, swallowing that pain back into his throat. "Let go of me." She shook her body left and right, putting up a fight. The man grabbed her wrist, suddenly hurting her. No matter how she tried, she could not break free from his grasp. For a second there, Bianca thought it was all over for her. This was where she would fall. A second later, though, the man abruptly let go of her. Her mind had gone blank. The first thing she wanted to do was run away from her, as soon as she could. She did not exactly close the door quietly. The noise made the two little children stir in bed, slowly waking up. It was late at night, and Bianca wandered the hotel corridors. She did not dare to linger for too long, but she could not go back to her room, and she definitely could not go to a dead end like the washroom. Eventually, she took the elevator and went down to the ground floor. The lights were brightly shining in the hotel lobby. There were 2 receptionists at the counter and 4 security guards standing watch outside. It did not matter who walked by. No one would be able to harass her. Even if they tried, the guards would be just 2 meters away. It was very safe here. "Here you go, miss." One of the receptionists kindly poured her a cup of hot tea. "Thank you." Bianca accepted the tea and took a few sips. It warmed up her cold body. It was destined to be a long night. The wait was torturous, but at least it would eventually come to an end. Bianca was woken up by the cold the next morning. Although she had a blanket over her, she realized that her nose was stuffed anyway, and her body was trembling. There was a high chance she had come down with a cold. Now that she had woken up, she had to deal with the consequences of what happened last night. Bianca hugged her arms and thought, if the boss sincerely apologizes for what happened last night, I might consider accepting his apology. If he does not seem remorseful at all, I'll resign without a second thought. She knew that it was perfectly cliched for male superiors to sexually harass their female subordinates. That did not change, be it locally or internationally. If she left this company, the same thing might happen again at her next workplace. To men, women were weak, but that did not mean every woman would do what the men expected of them. It was not quite possible for her to take this lying down. Of the two colleagues who came to H City on this trip with Bianca, the woman was Sue Carter, and the man Tom Lewis. At 8 o'clock, they went downstairs. "You sure are early, Bianca." Sue was about to have breakfast with Tom when she turned around and spotted Bianca. Bianca also felt a slight sense of security now that she had seen her colleague. She was about to stand up and leave with her colleagues. Just then, she saw the elevator doors on the left open. The great boss was walking out of the elevator with his son and daughter in tow. Bianca looked at them, her face pale. Luke's gaze was also accurately trained onto Bianca, who looked rather worse for the wear. "Go with your Uncle Doyle for now," Luke said to his children, lowering his head. Jason Doyle held Rainie's hand, and when the two of them walked past Bianca, Rainie even made an adorable little face at Bianca. Seeing Rainie made Bianca's heart soften for some reason. Jason brought the two children away for breakfast, gesturing at Sue and Tom to go with him. As for Luke, he never once looked away from Bianca. When he finally approached her, his eyes took in her fair cheeks as he said, "Why was I sleeping in your room last night?" Bianca blinked, raising her head to look at her boss. She had not expected this. Was this man an amnesiac drunk? Did he really not remember anything after sobering up? Their eyes met, and Bianca suddenly felt this was all so unfair. The man in front of her was almost 190 centimeters tall. He was really tall and slender, his shoulders broad and his hips narrow. His pure white shirt wrapped his well-toned torso perfectly. He looked all classy and gentlemanly now, as though the bad man who had pinned her down violently last night, hugging and sucking on her skin hungrily, was another person altogether. "You were drunk last night, Mr. Crawford," she said. "Yes, but I do remember some fragments." "Were you that woman last night?" he asked coolly. Bianca's breathing turned a little ragged, his gaze making her flustered. Did he think that she purposely pulled him into her room last night so that she could have a fling with her boss? Bianca hurriedly waved him off. "It wasn't me. I don't know what happened last night. After you took over my room last night, sir, a room service lady went inside, but she only stayed inside for 5 minutes before coming out again." The man was still staring at her, his gaze fixed on her face. He stared at her brow, her eyes, the tip of her nose, her lips. She actually only wanted to make light of the matter. Since her boss had forgotten all about it, she had no intention of accusing her boss of anything. Dang it though, why did she say 5 minutes? She should have said it was an hour. What happened? Did she steal something? Bianca asked. The man frowned and said sarcastically, "She didn't steal anything, but I think she touched that part of me." Bianca's face instantly reddened slightly, but she was not aware of it. Are you okay? Do you need to go to the hospital?" Bianca asked, startled. The man's sharp eyes met her flighty gaze. "I'm more worried about her knee, actually." "Bianca." "Whatever. Since she's in charge of room service, I'm sure she's used to getting a few knocks in the line of duty," the man said mildly. He then lit a cigarette with a frown and ignored Bianca, taking a drag as he left. She stayed right where she was. It was only now that she felt a tinge of pain in her knee. Lainey, and Rainie's mother, must have been out of the picture for a long time now. Why else would the boss act so crazy?